All right, so thank you all for joining us today for the D2R Training Program orientation session. So we are going to try to make this as interactive as possible. So if you're comfortable, feel free to turn on your camera and unmute yourself if you would like to speak. That would be much appreciated as that will help us have a more interactive session. All right, so I don't know, I'll just mention it one more time. If you've entered the chat as Roberta and not as yourself, I apologize. There was an issue with the link that was sent out in the reminder email. So if you could just rename yourself, that would be much appreciated. So before we start today's session, I wanted to acknowledge that McGill is on land which has long served as a site of meeting and exchange amongst Indigenous peoples, including the Haudenosaunee and Anishinaabe nations. We acknowledge and thank the diverse Indigenous peoples whose presence marks this territory on which today at McGill, people of the world now gather. And so some introductions. I will be doing the bulk of the talking from our end today. I'm Anthony. I'm D2R's Training Program Officer, but of relevance to my role here, where I'm mostly developing funding programs and admin support for those, as well as workshops such as today's for trainees within the D2R community. Up until about a year and a half ago, I was in many of your shoes, both as performing my PhD in the Department of Chemistry here at McGill, as well as um, doing a short stint as a postdoc in the physiology department. Also joining later in today's call will be Mary Lou, who's D2R Senior Advisor for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. And so she'll be kind of at the end describing some ways you can get involved in D2R's EDI efforts. And on the back end is Roberta, our excellent Senior Communications Officer, who will be helping with that and also helped develop the slides and content for today's session. So the objectives today for the session are, first of all, to bring together the D2R trainee community. And so this is why we offered this as an in-person session on Monday and now as an online session to try to be able to capture all of the people across D2R, as there are many trainees both at McGill and at D2R's partner institutions across Canada, like UBC, U Ottawa, McMaster, IRCM, and University of Sherbrooke. And so hopefully in today's session, as I mentioned earlier, I'm going to try to make it as interactive as possible. So if during the whole thing or parts of it, if you'd like to turn your camera on and unmute yourself to participate, that would be much appreciated. And so the second and third aims of today's talk are one, for you to learn about D2R's research scope and try to identify where does your project fit in within kind of D2R's overall research umbrella, as well as the bulk of today's session will be focused on the training program. So both introducing you to the training program and what we will offer, as well as providing you opportunity to try to think on the bigger picture development of yourself as a graduate student as you're working towards your research project, your involvement in the D2R community, and your future career. So if at any point during the session you have a question, feel free to ask it, unmute yourself and ask the question, raise your virtual hand, or ask it in the chat, and when I spot it, I will do my best to answer your question. With that being said, are there any questions right off the top, or shall we get started? All right, sounds good. And so first, I will provide an intro to what D2R is if you're not super familiar. So D2R is an inclusive Canadian approach to genomic-based RNA therapeutics. And so what that means is D2R is an initiative at McGill that is looking to expand on the already present expertise of McGill researchers in the fields of genomics and RNA-based therapeutics. And so this initiative is, and the people within it are working to develop an internationally leading project in the discovery, development of genome-guided RNA-based precision medicines, and alongside that, associated computational tools and the required clinical accelerator components to assure application of these discoveries for all Canadians and for the world. And so what that means so that mission is very theoretical, of course, but what that means in practice is that D2R is the application to the Canada First Research Excellence Fund was prepared by 50 researchers across McGill and D2R's partner institutions um, to receive funding from the federal government that extends until 2030. And so what this funding is doing is allowing us to fund D2R aligned research projects. And what does a D2R aligned research project mean is something I will get to in the later slides, as well as supporting initiatives like training of the next generation of researchers, as well as engagement with the general public, which is something that we are actively looking to build and work towards. And so how this mission to develop genome-guided RNA-based therapeutics will be achieved is, first of all, through building a community with a shared vision. And so this is us engaging and bringing together private and public sector partners, along with researchers across McGill and the partner institutions, to bring them from across disciplines together. And so, of course, many of you today might be in different departments from across McGill. You might know each other because you're in the same research groups, or you might have not seen each other before. And that was kind of the feel. I don't know. I know some of you were able to participate in the symposium earlier this year. And this is something that we're looking to do on an annual basis to really emphasize bringing together people from across our community that are working on like-minded research goals, but that aren't necessarily in the same departments or would normally speak together to try to develop collaborations within this community. Next, once we have built that community, as we're doing today, we are going to work towards educating them and you on best practices that are kind of on the leading edge of research. So obviously, many of the people in the field are those pushing the boundaries in RNA-based therapeutics and genomic medicine. But within the D2R support team, we're looking to also enable those people to be at the forefront of developments of incorporating EDI, for example, into research design and research practice, as well as better data science practices in their research. And so one of the main areas, of course, where much of the funding D2R has received will be channeled into is the strategic support of research projects. So D2R and public and private sector partners are currently funding over 35 research projects, 5 centers and institutes, and 9 core facilities, as well as many trainees, which I'll get to in a second, across the community. So we're currently funding over 80 trainees, either directly through the D2R Scholar Program or indirectly through the trainees working on D2R aligned research projects. And so that's where training the next generation becomes an essential component of D2R's mission, because as I mentioned earlier, D2R has funding towards 2030, but the real way for us to enable the impact of D2R to be felt further, along with the technologies developed, is through training that next generation of researchers. So D2R is financially and developmentally supporting master's students, PhD students, and postdoctoral fellows, and also working to develop programming to enable the development of, for example, CEGEP students or undergraduate students to kind of bring them into the D2R community. And so while the scope and mission of D2R of developing genome-guided RNA-based therapeutics is obviously very broad, one of the ways in which D2R is trying to narrow and make the focus more specific is through the designation of priority disease areas that are in a position to most take advantage of the benefits that genome-guided RNA therapeutics can deliver. So these priority disease areas, there were 3 initially outlined in the D2R first rounds of funding. These were infectious diseases, for example, the development of RNA-based vaccines, precision cancer therapy, obviously an area that different mutations can be even individual specific. So this is an area where RNA-based therapeutics could shine. And then rare diseases. Recently, a 4th priority disease area was added, and this is cardiovascular and cardiometabolic diseases. And the reason this priority disease area was added was to try to enable collaboration between researchers within D2R and other CFREF-funded initiatives from across Canada, in particular one hosted at the University of Ottawa. And so when D2R speaks about wanting to lead to develop technologies for all Canadians, what this means in practice is that D2R is championing Indigenous-led research, as well as including equity, diversity, and inclusion considerations at the core of every element we're developing. And that's why, for example, one of the upcoming trainings that we'll be offering for trainees is a training that's developed to kind of get researchers, even at the grad student level, to start thinking about how to fold EDI considerations into their projects. And so the idea of genomic-based RNA therapeutics is in principle an easy one, right? So you have genomics where you identify the gene or protein of interest. In practice, this could be identifying a biomarker that is identified in a specific form of cancer or a mutation linked to a rare disease. And because you have that genetic information about the underlying reason for whatever phenotype you're trying to fight against, you can design an RNA-based therapeutic to target that. And so these RNA-based therapeutics can be, for example, an mRNA vaccine if you're trying to develop that, like was done for COVID-19. Or you can use techniques such as ASOs or antisense oligonucleotides to modify mRNA translation. You can use genome editing technologies, or you can use aptamers, which will bind an antigen, for example, on the cell surface to either antagonize the activity of that antigen or to deliver cargo to the cell of interest. Now, while this idea of like having a gene and targeting it with some sequence of RNA that is specific to that gene is in theory easy, obviously in practice much more difficult. Some additional considerations that must be thought of are what is needed to go from simply a piece of RNA to an RNA therapeutic in terms of how do you make it bioavailable? How do you deliver it to cells, for example, with um, lipid nanoparticles, or how do you biomanufacture it at scale? These are important things to consider. And so additionally, it's important to think about what populations were involved in the actual identification of this biomarker, right? Is it just predominantly using genomic databases that are mostly white people of European descent? Because obviously that's not representative of the entire Canadian population. And also important to consider in terms of an EDI aspect is who will have access to the therapy, right? We're not just trying to develop therapies that are only accessible to people who can afford them, but we want to benefit all Canadians, which in many cases might be looking to benefit the populations that can't afford other forms of therapy. And so a final thing to think about as you're thinking about your research project is how do we go from an academic research setting to a clinical setting and then to implementation. And so these additional characteristics are all something that within D2R we are trying to implement and think about within our funded research projects. And that's why D2R is working to fund research projects along this D2R research pipeline. And so this research pipeline, once you're working within a priority disease area, goes all the way from the discovery of biomarkers and targets all the way to therapy implementation. And so, of course, once you've discovered a biomarker, let's say you discover 10 different genes of interest, you have to identify a target, a specific gene or phenotype or mutation of interest that will most likely be leading to the development of an RNA-based therapeutic. Then you actually have to, of course, develop that therapeutic. And then you have to do those other considerations, like how will it be synthesized at scale? How are you going to deliver it to cells? And then finally, you have to bring it into the clinic. So D2R is funding kind of projects at early stages with the hopes of bringing these projects all the way across this research pipeline, as well as funding projects, for example, that are at the leading edge of the more engineering fields in terms of developing lipid nanoparticles or more already in the clinical translation space, as these are things that we can learn and apply to other projects when they reach that stage. Along with this kind of central research pipeline, it's important to consider at every stage the policy and social determinants of health aspects. And so D2R is working to bring social scientists into the community as well. And encourage researchers outside of the social scientists to think about what populations are we targeting and why, and other elements of policy at every stage of the research. Additionally, kind of things that touch on all aspects are funding and support for improved data science and education for improved data science practices, as well as funding things like core facilities that might implement high throughput platforms and technologies that can be used by researchers at all the different stages. So before we kind of get into the first interactive component, I wanted to briefly touch on if there were any questions at this stage. Does this make sense? If you want to give a thumbs up if everything makes sense so far, or you want to ask a question in the chat, that would be much appreciated. Or unmute yourself when you feel free to ask a question. Thank you, Julia. All right. So now what we're going to do is if you see at the right, there's a QR code. And so this should bring you to a little quiz where I'd like you to answer the question of where does your project fit in this D2R research pipeline? So I'll leave this. If it doesn't work, let me know. The poll should be working. And if you could just answer that, and you can say, I encourage you, if you think your project fits along multiple stages, um, you can check as many options as you'd like within the options in the poll. And I'll leave this open for a couple minutes. In a minute, I will stop sharing the current screen and pull up the results so we can all talk about them together.
Hello, I'm trying to get in
Yep.
the poll, but it says
Yes.
that it's only for McGill students.
Okay. Okay. I'm sorry about that. Um, do what since you're already speaking, where do you think your research fits in?
Mine is RNA vaccine.
Okay. Towards what target are you trying to identify?
I mean, I hope I hope to a clinical, but
Yeah, yeah. And do you feel that like the RNA vaccine you're trying to develop is, or have you spent any time thinking about kind of the target populations for this vaccine, or what kind of disease are you looking at? And does
I
that
guess
impact different groups of the population more than others?
I guess for now we're just screening different types of cancer,
Okay.
but I guess it could be used for other diseases too.
Okay. Cool. Thank you. So now I'm going to stop share this window, and I apologize for the poll only being accessible to McGill people. That doesn't surprise me. Well, it's the McGill's approved software, but that's unfortunate. So I'll share the window that, can you all see my screen again?
Yeah, we see it.
Thank you. So now I'm going to close the poll. Okay, and so that's interesting that the the most common answer is the discovery of biomarkers and targets. And I would say that that's consistent with the group of people that attended the in-person session on Monday, because most of the people are coming in with projects more in the fundamental science space. But it's also quite interesting that there are some of you kind of thinking about data science and high throughput strategies, as these kind of maybe go hand in hand with the discovery of biomarkers and targets, right? If you're kind of working in the like genetic database kind of space, you might feel that you're discovering biomarkers and targets as well as implementing data science strategies. Um, Additionally, um, it's interesting that at this point, none of you feel like your projects kind of are in the policy and social determinants of health space. And I hope that through participation in these D2R training activities, you'll at least start to think about these things as we kind of build a community within the social sciences as well, and hope that your projects kind of fold in these aspects as they develop. Hopefully, maybe not in the lifespan of your grad school experience or postdoc experience, as they move towards the more clinical space, because that's especially when that's important to consider. And so now I'll go back to the slideshow. 1 second, my apologies. Because we have a second question. And so now that you've kind of thought about where your research is involved, what are other areas of this D2R research pipeline that are of interest to you? And so it's that poll should now be open. And if anyone from outside McGill would like to maybe put it in the chat, what other areas they're interested in learning about, that would be great. And we can fold your answers into the discussion as well. All right, I'll give it another minute or so. Okay, and someone says in the chat, I'm interested to learn about the biomarker discovery part. And that's interesting because that implies, I guess, that you're working further along the pipeline. And then you're probably at a stage of your research where maybe your area of knowledge could be helpful to people already at the or who are already working in the biomarker discovery part. And whoever commented that in the chat, I will mention again that we've had an issue with the link that was sent out in the reminder as everyone's coming through as our excellent Senior Communications Officer, Roberta. So if you wouldn't mind if you see that as your name, if you could rename yourself so we can get an accurate look at the attendance. Hi, Julia's cat. And so
Sorry about that.
no worries. I'll stop sharing again and I'll start sharing the polling window. And so then I'll give you 10 more seconds if you'd like to participate in the poll. All right, I'm going to close it now. And so that's great. I'm very happy to see that given discovery of biomarkers and targets was the area where people felt like they most fit in. It's interesting that it seems to be widespread across the different areas of D2R. And that's great. And because we are looking to develop um, different trainings and different seminars to kind of fold all of these different areas into what we kind of show trainees to kind of expose them to in terms of new areas of research, ways of thinking about their research. So it's great to see that all of you are interested in many different elements of D2R. And interestingly, the one other than the discovery of biomarkers and targets, that was the least common response, the synthesis, bioprocessing, and delivery. I know this is a topic area that maybe if your research isn't already there and you know how exciting this field can be, this can kind of seem like, oh, and to kind of someone in human genetics or chemistry, kind of moving into the engineering space might be a little daunting. That's interesting because one of the next trainings we're going to offer is a lunch and learn kind of showcasing why biomanufacturing in the RNA therapeutic space is exciting, and I'll speak about that in a little bit. And so now I'll pull back to the slideshow. Thank you all for your participation. And so now I will discuss with you, now that we've kind of laid the groundwork for what is involved in D2R research and what does it mean to be a D2R aligned research topic. And I hope you have a good idea now about where your kind of research fits within this scope. And so the components of training that will be part of D2R are the main component will be delivery of activities such as this through the D2R's training program. And so D2R's training program will be a series of workshops, events, and opportunities. If you received the first edition of the Training Updates newsletter, which is another component of training within D2R, you'll see that this is going to be organized within 3 different themes to kind of aid with communication and understanding of different training goals within D2R, and I'll get to those themes in a bit. But within these three themes, we will be developing workshops, events, and opportunities, as well as shouting out other excellent opportunities across McGill and other D2R community training operators. Additionally, alongside the training program, which offers the developmental support, financial support is delivered through training awards within D2R. And so this is the D2R Scholar Awards, which the master's and doctoral awards for 2025, 2026 have been awarded about a little over a month ago. So congratulations to you if you received one of those prizes. It was a very competitive process, and next year we're looking to be able to award even more awardees. So this is something that we're very excited about and look to continue to grow next year. And so, in addition to these Scholar Awards right now, training awards are distributed through program grants. So, if your PI is affiliated with D2R and has a D2R funded project, within that project, there's a dedicated training budget that is being used potentially to help fund your stipends. As I alluded to earlier, another component will be the training updates newsletter. And so this will be monthly around the middle of the month, featuring D2R training events and additional opportunities within the community. For example, in the first edition, we shouted out MyTax, which offers excellent trainings available to all Canadian graduate students, as well as other opportunities from around McGill, for example, through skill sets, MyPath, CAPS that maybe are of particular interest to the community. And so finally, an additional component, which we haven't really discussed yet, but we're looking to launch in the near future, is the development of a D2R trainee committee. And the goals of this committee will be to provide guidance on programming, hopefully development or communication of resources around a mentorship program, help develop by trainee for trainee events, as well as provide assistance for the research symposium, which we're looking to expand the trainee presence at next year. And so for the rest of the session, it will be focused on the training program and what the components are and what you can expect and how you might be able to start thinking about your development through the lens of D2R's training program. But the kind of what's next in terms of the training awards and training committee is going to be kind of touched on at the end of the talk. Yeah, and so thank you. Our comms team is just reminding you in the chat, if you're coming up as Roberta, please rename yourself so we have a good idea of who is participating in today's session. Thank you. And so in terms of the D2R training program, it's important when you're thinking about your training to recognize what you're already doing and kind of think about what you'd like to be doing in addition to that to ensure your success. And so this is kind of going to showcase what D2R will offer and hopefully get you thinking about how you can take advantage of that for your own training. And so the D2R training program will be split into three kind of themes or topic areas. The first of those is the Build a Base theme, which is focused on you developing the techniques and skills to become a world-class researcher. So basically, this means developing techniques and strategies to become better at performing your D2R aligned research project. Then the second theme, which is Broaden Your Vision, will offer events and opportunities geared towards discovering the scope of D2R and integrating into the D2R community. And so in this theme, it's kind of it's not just thinking about your research, it's doing that activity and thinking about taking a step back and thinking, where does my research fit within D2R, learning about the research across D2R, as well as becoming part of the community. Finally, the last theme is when you want to take a step back potentially from academic research entirely and start thinking about your future career and science outside of the academic research space. And we've entitled that Discover Your Path. So now you're a D2R trainee. How can being a D2R trainee help you once you're kind of through grad school or through your postdoc or through your undergrad, whatever stage you're currently at? And so now I will take you through each of these themes, tell you what kind of events we're looking to develop within D2R, and kind of get you doing some activities to start thinking about your development within these contexts. And so in this Build a Base theme, which I mentioned is kind of geared towards incorporating core elements of D2R into your research project, which is the second objective listed there. But importantly, it's also important to consider how excelling in your coursework and in your day-to-day research activities is actually contributing to your development as a scientist, right? So it's easy, I know I was a grad student myself, to kind of think of coursework as check boxes that you just want to get through, or your research activities as something separate completely from your development as a scientist. But these things teach you soft skills, hard skills, and everything in between that will lead to your development. So it's important to think about when you're developing the techniques and skills to become a great researcher. Maybe you're learning skills in the lab that you love. Let's say potentially you learn a skill in the lab, like in my PhD, I did fluorescence microscopy. Maybe that leads to something else in your career. So your development is learning that technique as well as possible. Or maybe it's incorporating core elements of D2R into your project, such as some of the activities that we're going to offer to help you do that. So in addition to today's orientation session, which kind of bridges multiple themes of the D2R training program, one of the next events we will offer in November is a targeted EDI training for trainees within the D2R community that focuses on incorporating aspects of EDI into your RNA therapeutic aligned research projects in terms of the research design, as well as um, giving you techniques and strategies to bring that into your research practice as well. And then in January, we plan to offer, or in the new year, a data science training to kind of help you to demystify data science. So if you're not working in the data science space, the goal would be to kind of familiarize yourself with concepts, as well as potentially discussing your research project and your research questions with excellent experts within the data science field. And so some complementary elements um, under this theme that will be shouted out, for example, in the Training Updates newsletter, are additional D2R EDI and data science training. So in the first edition of the newsletter, there was a specific D2R data science virtual workshop that was shouted out. And if you're interested, that's available as an event on the D2R website, as well as making people aware of other trainings going on within the community. For example, for those at McGill, some skill sets is constantly offering trainings that can be very helpful in your development as a researcher. And so now I wanted to kind of encourage you to start thinking about your development as a researcher. And this can be thinking about how you can take advantage of the offerings that D2R will have, and you'll have the chance to take part in. Or if you want to think about it in a slightly different space, not necessarily D2R line, that's also excellent. So the first step of this kind of planning for what the next 12 months looks like is reflection. So I want you all to think about, if you'll go along with me here, over the last year, are you happy with the progress you have made as a developing researcher or not? And so this is not asking if you're happy about the progress you've made on your research project. That's a separate, potentially, obviously, probably, unfortunately, too linked to this question, but it is a separate, distinct question. So are you happy with the progress you've made as a developing researcher? Potentially, if you are, it's important to think about over the next year, how would you like to continue developing? What did you do over the last year that helped your development? And how can you continue doing that without potentially burning out? And know, how would you, if you don't feel like you've progressed as a developing researcher over the last year, why? Maybe it's an issue with priorities, always prioritizing, for example, lab work over your own mental health or your own progress as a researcher. And how can you change that for the next year? Um, so this, Amanda, so this is not, we're not sharing this. So this isn't necessarily with the QR code. There will be another interactive activity with the QR code, no worries, later on. This is just for a little self-reflection, and maybe if people are I'll ask maybe for some participation in a minute, but right now I'd just like you to think for this question yourself. And so regardless of which of these two situations you're in, it's important to think both times, what steps must you kind of achieve over the next year? So if you want to think about one concrete way in which you'd like to develop over the next year in your own research, maybe it is learn a research technique that you're interested in. Maybe it's developing a research collaboration. Maybe it's improving your public speaking skills, for example. What steps must you achieve to reach this goal? And what are some concrete things along the way that you need to achieve to what are the actions and tasks needed to reach this goal? So what is the goal and what do you need to do to get to that goal? So now if you'll go along with me, I'll give you a couple minutes to kind of think about this for yourself, and then we'll come back and see if anyone would like to share. If not, I hope you still find this activity helpful. And so I'll give you a minute to think about this, and then I'll come back. All right, so this is also something I encourage you to think about if you find this kind of exercise helpful afterwards as well. But if anyone would like to share a goal in the chat or out loud, that would be great. And we can maybe have some conversation. If not, we can move on to the next activity, and that's totally fine. I don't know. I know Julia and Raisa, you have your video on. I don't know if either of you wanted to participate or not. If yes, that would be great. If not, that's totally fine.
Yeah, I guess I could share since I'm
Thank you.
already here. I don't know. I think a couple different things came to mind, but maybe one of them is I TA'd more over the past year, and I feel like that really helped me,
Mm.
um, learn not only about specific things that I'm using in my project, but also learn more about topics more broadly because we need to know that to teach the students. Um, so in that sense, I felt satisfied with that. And something I wasn't expecting maybe from TAing is because there's sometimes guest lectures from industry, there was more contact with industry people. So maybe that would be my goals for the next year is to improve that contact with industry because my project is related to biomanufacturing. So I feel like the more connection I have to them, the more realistic my project goals become.
And was the course you were TAing related to your research, or was it kind of totally unrelated, or how did that interact?
It's kind of related because it's part of the biomanufacturing
Okay.
non-thesis masters in the
Yeah.
bioengineering department. So the courses are kind of related to RNA manufacturing.
Okay. Very cool. Thank you.
Thank you. I can also share my goal. My project is about CRISPR-Cas9, and it's quite like a new direction, either for our lab or in general. So I think the steps I can make to reach my goal this year is that during the symposium and attending D2R events, it helped me to learn more about it and to see more professors who are already doing. So by participating in D2R programs, as much as I can, as many times as I can, I think it can help to build more of the knowledge base of gene editing. And I think that is my goal for the next year. And the things I can do to achieve this objective in particular is to planification. So to plan a real schedule that can be optimized so that I meet my goals for example, every 2 months. I think that
Yeah.
can help in general. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Raisa.
Mm.
Yeah, and that's what you touched on at the end there is important and something we'll discuss a little more when we talk about goals in the next theme, is the idea of making something that seems like a very large goal, breaking it into steps that you can actually measure and track. For example, Julia, with your goal, maybe saying, is it reasonable once a month to try to do something that gets you thinking about industry? Because obviously, every single day, unless you're a very avid LinkedIn user, you're not going to be in contact with industry all the time. But yeah, making something and making a commitment that is actually manageable for you and your priorities is very important. And so with that, I'll move on to the second theme, which is broaden your vision. So this is kind of also involved in what we're doing today, right? We're bringing together the community from across D2R, and hopefully you feel more integrated into the community after today's session than you did before. And so this is in addition to learning about the research pipeline of D2R and other research areas. One of the ways in which we're going to try to help the community is through the development of research collaboration skills and providing opportunities and strategies to communicate your science to the community. And so some of the core activities in the new year, there will be a research collaboration workshop that we will be developing, as well as at the end of April next year, there will be the D2R Research Symposium. So as I mentioned earlier, last year there was a limited participation of trainees, and we're looking into having a larger space and more trainee participation, potentially both at the symposium and events associated with the symposium. And additional elements under kind of this broaden your vision theme are D2R seminar series. I don't know if any of you were able to participate or attend Eric Westhoff's presentation a couple weeks ago, but that was one opportunity, and we will have others in which we're showcasing research from across research that's aligned with D2R from across the different disciplines, as well as potentially hosting special topic workshops, as well as importantly, for example, starting the trainee community and trying to build a core, start the trainee committee to build a core by trainee for trainee energy within the D2R initiative, and then have that trainee committee develop programming. For example, developing trainee talks, which offer opportunities for trainees to share their research, not only with their community, or their normal people, like their departmental research day or their lab, but also thinking about sharing their research across all of D2R. And so with that, we have, I need to open this poll. Just give me 1 second. And so let me just open the poll. Okay, now I will pull back the slide, and now you should be able to scan the QR code, and within 20 character limit, so feel free to say more than one way. How do you want to become involved in the D2R community? Do you want to join the trainee committee? Would you like to give trainee talks? Would you like to attend the symposium? Would you like to develop research collaboration? These are all some ideas. And so if you scan this QR code, you should be able to put in a text with 20 characters. And if that isn't working, let me know. And I'll just give you a couple minutes to think about that. And if any people from outside McGill who unfortunately aren't able to access this poll, if you mention in the chat how you'd like to get involved in the community, that would be excellent. Thanks. So, all right, I'll give you another 30 seconds or so if you'd like to participate. Perfect. Thanks for in the chat. Yes, I agree. The symposium, the trainees we were able to host last year at the symposium, it was a great experience, I hope. And so that's why we're looking to expand it this year, is I think that's a great opportunity for trainees to learn about research from across D2R from the experts, as well as kind of in-person participation and attendance across the and interact with trainees as well. And so I will now close the poll. And so, yeah, this is the same problem we had at the in-person one. But basically, many of you are probably saying similar things, but they are slightly different wording. So you're all, but like, yes, comes things that are coming up are mentorship, which is excellent, connecting with other trainees, attending workshops, the symposium, organizing events. I will plug here as well as later if you're interested in organizing events or interested in the training committee. A link will be sent out to all participants of this event afterwards for you to express interest in joining the committee. And so it's great to see that so many of you are interested, and by your attendance today, that also means you're interested. Thank you in participating in the community. But one of the challenges is how do you kind of, I hope, you're seeing my slides again. How do you want to become involved in the community? How does that kind of turn into an actual actionable goal? And so kind of one framework that I've kind of alluded to earlier about turning a goal into a goal that you can actually work towards with steps is the SMART goal framework. And so this framework is basically taking an abstract vision or a goal and turning it into something you can work towards by making it specific, measurable, thinking about the abilities you're going to gain while working towards it, thinking about why are you interested in it now, and making sure it's tenable. So something you can ensure is doable and you have the resources to do that. And so when you're thinking about this goal, it's when you're thinking about how to make it specific, you want to think, you want a clear description of what you want to accomplish. So you want a specific activity list, action list, task list. For example, if your goal is participating in the D2R Research Symposium, that's a specific goal that's already more specific than, for example, working on your research presentation skills, right? But this is kind of the end of the goal. What are the steps along the way? If you want to present at the symposium, maybe it's at your next lab meeting if you're in a group where you have the opportunity to present at lab meetings. Maybe it's generate a more general introduction or start thinking about how to prepare a more general introduction for a general audience that you can incorporate into a presentation or a poster. Or maybe it's you want to present at a smaller meeting in advance of the symposium. That's also something you can think about. And then, of course, there's the steps of submitting your abstract, writing your abstract, submitting your abstract, coming up with the title, making the poster that you and your PI both kind of agree is acceptable for how much of your research you want to discuss on. And then there's after you have a specific goal, you want to make sure that goal is measurable. So there's different types of goals. There's project goals, which has a defined end date deliverable. For example, if you're at a stage of your degree when you're thinking about your thesis, this is clearly a project goal, as there's an end deliverable, but there's also elements of kind of every goal that are also habit or developmental. So habit being something that's ongoing, monitor maintenance. Maybe this is the goal of Julia, you mentioned interacting with industry. Like this is the kind of once a month I want to participate in something with industry. Or in terms of development goals or ongoing with defined milestones, you can even turn a project goal into a developmental goal, right? Like let's say presenting at the research symposium, you can create some defined milestones for yourself that you can measure. In terms of the abilities, this one, once you think about what you want to develop, for example, presentation skills are something you develop by preparing for your presentation at the symposium, or writing skills if you're thinking about working on your thesis or a paper, or in general, your if you attend the symposium, you're going to work on your networking skills, for example. So these are kind of things that are important to think about because that also are linked to your why. Right? So what is your why for this goal? Because if you can't answer the why, then it becomes much more difficult to think about those abilities because you don't want to just choose a goal that is there because that's what your supervisor says. You have to provide a why for it. How will it help you develop? And that has to be of an interest where how you want to develop, right? And why is it a priority now for you? In terms of presenting at the symposium, if I go back to that example again, this is where um, you can think about why is it a priority now? Maybe this is an opportunity within kind of the D2R community. If you do engage in our events, that the symposium might be a somewhat familiar environment for you. So it's a step kind of before you go to that national conference or that international conference. But it's a step kind of beyond, as I mentioned, your research day. And then finally, in terms of developing a tenable goal, it's important to think about how is this doable and what resources will you need? So this is using if-then statements to plan for how you might overcome obstacles. For example, let's say you're working on your research, but your research isn't at a stage and you've set that goal of presenting at the symposium. What if your researcher isn't at a stage where you're actually ready yet? Well, maybe if your research isn't at a stage that it's ready, you kind of have a backup plan for another conference maybe next fall that you can present at with the goal of potentially participating in the 2027 D2R Research Symposium, for example. And next year, maybe you just choose to volunteer so you can still participate, for example. And so now we're going to try, I hope as many of you are willing to participate as possible. I wanted to try to kind of do assign breakout rooms. And so in a minute, I will kind of assign everyone to breakout rooms. So if I'd appreciate if you participate in those breakout rooms so you can kind of discussing and meeting people across the community and talk about how do you want to become involved in the D2R community, one. And secondly, how can your involvement in the D2R community be developed into a goal? And if in these breakout rooms is what you talk about is kind of just introducing yourself, that's already kind of becoming more involved in the community as well, right? So I'll give you 5 to 10 minutes. There'll be a warning when I'm going to close the breakout rooms, but it'd be great if you could just participate and join. So I'm going to start the breakout rooms here. And so I will assign it so that there's 4 participants per breakout room. And so I'll see you all in a few minutes. I might jump around, but I'll see you in a few minutes. All right. So I hope that during those breakout rooms, you had the chance to kind of introduce yourselves, kind of learn about the research you're doing. And if you had the opportunity to discuss the goals, that's great. If not, I hope this is something or an exercise you think would be useful and you can think about for your own integration into the community and development over the next 12 months. And so with that, the last kind of area and theme within the training program will be discovering your path, which is ways in which we want to help you increase your knowledge of your career options and science outside of academic environments. So moving away from the academic research space through exposing you to different ways science is done in industry or in other places, as well as helping you develop the skills and gain experience to build your future careers. Because we appreciate that depending on the stage of your degree, or if you're a PhD student or a master's student, or a postdoc, you're probably all at different stages about envisioning and planning for your future career. And so what we will aim to offer in terms of core activities within this theme are commercialization trainings as well, and this will target different things. For example, venture capital, thinking about a startup, thinking about science and industry, kind of beyond the academic space. And we will look to host a career event likely next summer geared towards the RNA therapeutic space. Some complementary elements will be D2R industry insights. So this is kind of something D2R has many private sector partners. And so those will be open to training. I don't, if you could, someone is currently not muted. If you could please mute yourself so we can't hear. Thank you. And so the industry insight events will try to show you different, for example, pharmaceutical companies, how they're thinking about science or other industry aspects, as well as running lunch and learns to kind of show science outside of the academic environment. As well, we are looking to develop, as I mentioned earlier, internship opportunities, as well as showcasing other kind of career-focused training opportunities, largely within our training updates newsletter. And so there's kind of two extremes, right, about where you are in your thinking about your career. There's one extreme is you really have no idea. You're kind of doing your current research, but you might be starting to think about what do you want to prioritize? What do you want to think about in terms of a career goal? At least for me, early in my degree, I was largely thinking, do I want to stay in academia? Do I not want to stay in academia? I think that's a place many people will find themselves at some point. Or the other extreme is having a clear vision of your career goal, right? You know you want to, for example, start your own company, and like you're planning steps along the way, or you know you want to be an academic researcher, and so you're lining up, for example, you're ensuring that you have a strong publication record, or you're planning for your postdoc. But if you find yourself kind of in situation one or closer to situation one, I know many of you will probably fall somewhere in the middle. One useful activity might be to think about kind of what in the big picture do you want within a career opportunity or a job opportunity. And so here are several categories in terms of like work dynamic, how you interact with colleagues, what motivates you, and what your culture is, work culture. Like you can think about within each of these categories, what do you find is the most important to you? For example, in a work dynamic, are you most looking forward to a challenge? Or do you want autonomy, flexibility, or variety in your work tasks? So within each of these categories, you can kind of think about which is more important to you and rank them, or identify within this whole matrix the key things for you. For example, work-life balance. Having being around a lot of academic researchers, for example, work-life balance might not be, if that's something you want to prioritize, that might be something specifically challenging to the demands of staying in academia, for example. And if you're kind of more in this second situation where you have a already clear vision of your career goals, it's important to think about what specific skills do you want to gain over the next year working towards these goals. And this is where you can kind of use a similar framework to think about a concrete goal you can work towards. And so now I'll give you a couple minutes just to think. We don't need to discuss this, but just to think about which situation you kind of see yourself in and what type of activity would be most useful for you. Planning specific career goals or more thinking about the big picture of what type of career you'd like. And so I will give you a couple minutes to think about this, and then we'll come back together and kind of move into the wrap-up stage of the presentation. All right, so now since I already picked on Julia, I'll ask George, since you have your camera on, if you don't mind sharing. I think you, if you just want to nod, that's okay too. I think you're doing your postdoc, right? And so where do you think you have a clear vision of your career goals, or are you still kind of, because I did a short postdoc. I don't know if you're doing a postdoc to waiting to get a job or you'd like to stay in academia. Like what kind of area do you see yourself in?
Yeah, so I've always had a academic career goal. And I guess like I was really gunning for it when I started my PhD. By the end, it was still more or less my goal. But there's a lot of things that kind of might like kind of slightly disillusion me. So it's like, it's still still my goal, but I think like I've just also become more saw like um a bit more about like what like an industry path can offer, for example. So I think just trying to work toward the academic goal, but kind of keep in mind like try to gain some experiences that might help me like if I want to pivot as well, just to keep some options open, I guess.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thanks for sharing. And Hide, I don't know if that's the correct pronunciation of your name or not. If you'd like to correct me, that would be great.
It's Hedier.
Hedier, okay, thank you.
Yes.
And you're in your master's, correct?
Yes, second year of
And
master's.
so, yeah, which do you think you have? Like, do you know if you want to do a PhD or like, do you have a vision of what you'd like to do?
I think um I do want to do a PhD. And I think for now my career vision is a bit more academic focused. Just because I'm interested in teaching as well.
Okay.
But similar to George, I'm also interested in learning what's out there in terms of industry, and then if maybe one day I might want to go to that area. Yeah.
Mhm. No, perfect. That's great. Thanks. And I hope that for both of you that there's enough, like within D2R, there's opportunities to kind of explore that industry space because I know like within your departments and within your universities, there's probably a lot of opportunities to interact and hear from academics. And hopefully here we're looking to kind of offer something different as well. And so kind of if you're a student, grad student at McGill, you might have been kind of familiar with, or maybe other universities have a similar idea, but the idea of developing an individual development plan. Um, and so all McGill grad students are required to complete an IDP and attend one IDP workshop. So if you're later on in your degree, you might have already done this, but if you're found kind of the activities today engaging and interesting, we will share a custom D2R training program, individual development plan template with everyone who participated that kind of builds in the making your vision statement, planning your goals, which within each of the themes for D2R, if you feel that that would be a good way for you to become kind of linked with the program. And so if you are at McGill and have actively participated today, completion and working towards this IDP and attending today's workshop is going to fulfill those requirements by McGill. And so if you've actively participated today, your information will be sent to McGill GPS. And so I highly encourage you to attend other workshops and at your own university, other goal setting workshops. But in terms of trainees based at McGill, this will kind of fulfill that requirement to you. Although in our workshop, in our training updates newsletters, we will continue to shout out ongoing goal setting workshops from other providers if you found this activity interesting, as kind of reframing your day-to-day tasks as your own development, I think is an important skill and tool. And so in terms of expectations for training award holders, we are asking all D2R scholars and those working on D2R funded research projects to kind of think about the development of an IDP and work towards this, and to work towards their training goals through actively participating in the training program event, like attending and discussing today. And a firm requirement for all funded researchers will be the submission of an annual report detailing both your research progress and your training progress. So preparation of this report will be much easier if kind of throughout the year you're thinking about your participation in D2R events and other events kind of through this developmental lens. And so in terms for the last 10 minutes, what we will discuss, and I will be bringing in Mary Lou shortly, our excellent senior EDI advisor, to discuss kind of what's going on in the EDI space within D2R. But this QR code here, which will take you to the D2R training website, which will kind of be up to date with what's going on in terms of events and funding opportunities. And so, of course, if you have any questions, you can always email the D2R training at mcgill.ca email address. And so in terms of upcoming funding opportunities, the second edition of the Master's and Doctoral Scholar Awards will be launching in spring 2026. And of course, the postdoc awards, the evaluation is still ongoing, but that also is, we anticipate being an annual competition. So regardless of the result this year, we encourage you to apply as long as you remain eligible going forward. And so hopefully, if you did apply and were unsuccessful, we're able to provide feedback to all applicants, and hopefully that will help you develop an even more excellent application next year. And we will also be looking to develop industry internship opportunities with the goal of supporting internships in summer 2026. In the chat, currently we're not offering any travel awards, but that's definitely something we're thinking about. So if you're interested in that, and once we start the trainee committee, that would be a space to kind of discuss these kind of initiatives, as that's something that I know is a barrier for many people to travel to conferences. And if D2R can support that, that would be great to learn from trainees, as you're the voice of that kind of need. And that's be something we can discuss going forward. In terms of the trainee committee, as I mentioned, alongside some links to EDI initiatives that Mary Lou will be speaking about in a second, after the end of this presentation, we will be sharing kind of a form with you if you're interested in participating in the trainee committee, which, as I was moving through the breakout rooms, I know that's something that many of you are interested in. So if you are, it'll be a short form to say why and how you're interested to participate. And so briefly, upcoming training events, we will have a biomanufacturing lunch and learn with our training partner Castle up on November 6th. So this will be also details of this in the next training updates newsletter, as well as an EDI for trainee session, which will be hosted by Mary Lou and one of your peer trainees. That's coming up in mid-November. And now I'll invite Mary Lou under my name to continue discussing EDI opportunities at D2R.
Hi everyone, my name is Mary Lou. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm the Senior Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Advisor at the D2R Initiative. I work closely with Anthony. We literally have our desks next to each other if ever you come to the D2R office. And as you know, EDI is at the core of D2R. It's really important for us to have inclusive research, and to do that we need any type of initiative or support by the trainees. So that's why I'm coming today just to present to you 3 ways that you can get engaged with the EDI initiatives that we have at D2R. Of course, I'm open to any type of ideas, collaborations, but these are really 3 concrete ways we could collaborate together if you want to. So the first opportunity is to join our EDI community of practice for trainees. So what is a community of practice? We're really speaking about a group of people with common interests that come together to engage in a collective way to also share and network together. So it's really an opportunity if you have any issues, any barriers that you're facing that you want to address. I heard Anthony speak a bit briefly as I entered into the room. He was saying if you need any support for traveling or things like that, these sometimes could be EDI issues to address together, for instance. So anything like that could be discussed in the community of practice. And we have a community of practice like that also for professors and research and admin staff related to D2R. And currently, we're working together with that community of practice to develop guidelines to have EDI practices in our research labs around D2R. So these are all kind of things that we can really bring from an idea to a concrete document, event, or solution together. So the plan is to have 4 meetings in October, November, January, and March. And those meetings are of an hour and a half, and they're on the lunch break. So the goal is really to share EDI challenges and co-create solutions together. So in the next PowerPoint slide, you will see that there's a QR code. If ever you want to join the community of practice, you're really welcome to do so. Also, we have the EDI updates mailing list. So Anthony has a mailing list for trainees, but the EDI updates one is the opportunity to see curated articles and resources on EDI, to have engagement opportunities with ongoing EDI initiatives. So sometimes when I see something interesting, I could put it in there. So if that's something you want to know about, you're welcome to join the EDI mailing list. And also, if you want to have community contributions, if you're someone that's involved into EDI initiatives and you just want to share what you're doing, what you're reading, or what you see as an opportunity, that's the place to do that as well. And also, the third opportunity is to register to our EDI events, and we have one that's upcoming very soon. The next one will be on breast cancer and RNA therapeutics. I don't know if you know, but the month of October is the month of breast cancer awareness. So for the occasion, we're going to have a great conversation in person on campus where we're going to have a panel to discuss about the career opportunities related to fighting breast cancer and RNA therapeutics. And also, we're going to have a panel on how to do inclusive research that addresses the needs of patients from different backgrounds. So I think it is going to be very interesting. And if you want to volunteer for that, we need help. We need help from students because we want to have food there. You're going to have access to free food. So we just need help from students to set up the room. And if you're interested to do that, that would be very helpful. So you have my contact information as well. I shared a lot of initiatives, but also EDI is about supporting people. So if ever you're facing any difficult situation, or if you have questions, concerns, or sometimes you could have an idea of how to solve a situation, so you could just share that with me by email. And here are the 3 QR codes on the screen. So the first one for the community of practice, if you want to join. The second one is to sign up for EDI updates. And the third one is to join us for the breast cancer event. If you want to volunteer for the event, you could send me an email and I'll basically just contact you and we could see how we could collaborate on this together. So thank you so much. And I hope that you'll enjoy your adventure in the D2R community. Thank you. Bye.
All right, and so I will after this share these slides with you. So if you haven't had a chance to scan these QR codes quite yet, that's all right. I will also Mary Lou sent me a link to sign up to volunteer. So I will I will share that in the chat. And so if you're interested in volunteering, you can go ahead and submit it through that link. Let me just copy. So if you click on that link, it'll take you to a Microsoft form if you're interested in volunteering. And if you don't have a chance to click the link in this meeting, then let us know and we'll be able to share it with you again. And so that's basically the end of our presentation today. We're pretty much right on time, which is a minor miracle. And so thank you all for your participation and active engagement in this session. I hope you came away with it learning more about the community, and kind of now you'll have a couple familiar faces within the D2R community. And if you have any questions, please email d2rtraining@mcgill.ca. and stay up to date by visiting the training page on the D2R website. All of our events, we will work our best to make them accessible to people all across the D2R network, all across Canada. So we'll continue offering in-person events and online events and trying to bring everyone together any way we can. So if there's I'll give it a second if there's any questions before we wrap up. But thank you all for your participation, and I look forward to your in continuing engagement with D2R. And I hope today in meeting people and interacting and learning more about D2R has only increased your likelihood of participating going forward. And I hope that you kind of now have a better picture of how you can take advantage of what D2R is going to offer you in terms of training. So with that, I will thank you all again for your participation, and I will end the session for everyone. So thanks. Have a great next rest of your Wednesday. Happy Thanksgiving long weekend coming up for all of you, and thanks a lot.